Welcome to the 8th Love and a Time of Corona session, where we'll be discussing Paul Cluver's Ferricrete Sauvignon Blanc with surprise visits from Liesl and Andries. Okay, so let's get started. So we are now at Paul Cluver. Now I know a lot of you know Paul Cluver. I think quite a few of us were there just recently, probably the last concert that was done before lockdown. I'm talking about the Watershed Paul Cluver concert in the ampitheatre there. And Craig's with us, so that's pretty cool. I'd never been to the venue before. It's absolutely amazing venue with these huge gum trees, and it's intimate. You can only fit like 600 people, and if you've never been there, go to that amphitheatre. I hope that the concerts go on into the future. I know they stopped them for a year. Hey Craig, what's the news on that? Do they are they going to carry on playing concerts?
We sincerely hope so. We've been playing there for probably 10 years now, and it's on our calendar. It's definitely the best venue that we've played at, purely because of the size. I think 600 people is a great sized audience. It sort of feels intimate, but at the same time, it's a nice sized crowd. But it's just such a special venue. It's sort of semi-natural, so they've obviously created this amphitheatre, and it's a really cool spot. So,
they are carrying on with the...
so we sincerely hope that they do. No one said that they aren't.
Cool.
And there's also always been an interesting angle. More recently, they've had a charity linked with it for a couple of years, but this year that charity wasn't there anymore. So it was sort of pretty much Paul Cluver running the show again. So I'm not sure what happened there, but it's always it's a feel good thing. And obviously with our crowd that you were the most recent one, it's just been a lot of fun. It's been part of our energy behind it.
I wanted to ask you a question just before we get on to the wine. I know Watershed's 20 years this year. How's this? You said you wanted to release an album. How's this corona impacting you? Are you still making songs? I heard that released.
No, it is. Yeah, we are. We had a big year planned, and it just sort of it's been kicked in the teeth. But that's cool. I think this time is about being particularly creative now. We had a German promoter that actually came to that Paul Cluver gig, and we started plotting and planning a big Europe break-in again, and that's all. I mean, we were planning that for 2021, so we're still good with time there. But I think for now, it's just trying to stick with those timelines, and that's to try and get a new album out by maybe the 10th of October. And I think this time's been really cool. It's as bleak as it sounds, it's fairly inspiring.
Awesome. Yeah, so lots of material, I guess. Cool. So yeah, everyone knows about Watershed, obviously, but the Paul Cluver Amphitheatre. I must say, it's a remarkable venue, and that's only just one side of the Paul Cluver family. People, please jump in if you know more about it. Paul Cluver's fourth generation. It's been owned for over 120 years, but not necessarily as a wine farm, as a fruit farm. And in 1986, there was a collaboration between Paul Cluver, Dr. Paul Cluver, and Stellenbosch Farmers Winery. Stellenbosch Farmers Winery ultimately became Distel. Stellenbosch Farmers Winery was also, the MD of Stellenbosch Farmers Winery was Ronnie Malk, my dad's cousin. So I like these sort of stories and interplay. And back then, what they did was they decided to plant wine. This was before KWV was still around, before apartheid had finished. They decided to grow some of the cool climate grapes, Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Chardonnay. And these are really cool climate grapes, and we spoke about that in one of our old sessions. So this is where it started. And so 1986, was when the grapes started getting put in. It was only after apartheid, 1996, when the Nederburg winemaker, I can't remember his name, came through, and they made wines under the Paul Cluver label. And that was their first Paul Cluver label in 1997 with these cool varieties. The only red wine that they have at Paul Cluver is Pinot Noir, which is also a cool climate. And we'll talk about how many awards they've won with that. They've got like a range of 3. And every time I go to award ceremonies, Paul Cluver's always there. But they're more than just a fruit farm. They're more than just a wine farm. That is an exceptional wine farm. You know, when I say exceptional, if you talk about the first growth, that this review or this wine report that Tim Atkin puts together, Paul Cluver's been one of 12 in the first growths. That was in 2013, but they've been there since. So that means in terms of this UK wine critic, it's one of the top 12, at least, wine places, which is fairly impressive. So, yeah. Yeah, so Paul Cluver and Elgin, they are the pioneers of wine in Elgin. They started it. They've got the biggest farm together with Oak Valley. But as I said, and it's a family affair. So Dr. Paul Cluver is now handed over to his son as the MD, but the other siblings are doing the fruit farming, and there's a whole lot of stuff. It's part of a UNESCO site, the Kuckelberg Biosphere, which makes it quite unique. And we know about Fynbos and the Cape Biosphere, but they're part of that UNESCO site. They also set up a De Rust Futura school. The late Mrs. Cluver set that up. So they've got a school on there. There was a whole lot of land after fire. No, what happened was that there were a whole lot of forests that were getting taken down, and it meant that there was going to be a whole lot of job losses. So they created 200 hectares of space, and part of that was on the Paul Cluver property, where they set up a school and they set up fruit farms and subsequently wine farms to create wine. And then from that came the Tundi Project. And the Tundi Project was a social upliftment project. It became a brand, Tundi Wine, world's first wine to be accredited fair trade. And if you look into the social upliftment and what Paul Cluver and the family have done, it just goes on and on and on. Just go onto their website, you'll see there's so much that they do and give back to. It's not just wine and it's not just fruit, although fruit is their predominant source. Elgin is apple territory. It's predominantly apples. Wine has come in, and because of the cool climate, it's made a huge impact. The restaurant there's Salt. And I know a lot of us met Craig Cormack when we had a lunch there. And he's our salt guy. He's got the biggest salt collection, as he said to us, I think he thinks in the world, which is quite impressive. I know Craig from judging on the Distill Into Hotel Challenge, which is like the Oscars of the hospitality industry. And it's the best chefs, the best sommeliers, the best concierge and wine stewards. And we were there to judge the wine and food pairing. So I got to know him through that, and it was quite funny because, you know, we're supposed to be highly skilled on our trade, but the more you drink, the more funny it gets. It was just funny, I guess. So, and he's a remarkable guy. He's a really, really cool guy. If you haven't met him, he's very approachable. He's very lucky. And then we've got the winemaker, Andries Berger. For me, Andries Berger is like an enigma. You know, he's part of the Cape Winemakers Guild. He's won many, many awards. I think he's been with Paul Cluver almost from the beginning. He has studied wine in France, all over, and something like a Chateau Margaux, one of our first growths. He goes to Burgundy every year because Pinot Noir and Chardonnay are his things. He's won so many wines. I've had a tasting with him, and I can't reconcile it. He's like so smart, and he's so, I don't know. He's an amazing, amazing winemaker. He's brilliant. And you know what? He gets all these awards, and they've chosen not to put any awards on their bottles because he says at the end of the day, it's about the quality of the wine. And you'd rather have people drinking the wine and talking about it than talking about the awards, which sometimes happens. I hear various stories about the good winemakers. You know, the one guy, blank bottle, he doesn't tell you what's in the wine. And he doesn't want people to go there with a preconceived notion of the wine. So you don't know what's in the bottle. He's got like 30 different grape varieties that come from 60 sites, and he makes wines and they're not necessarily the same every year. So sometimes it's just a snapshot. So he doesn't have vertical tastings of years, because he makes a wine, and then whatever he sees in the year, he makes a different wine. So you only get a limited release, and you don't know what, because you can't read on the bottle. So you're actually just tasting without any preconceived notions. And a lot of the good winemakers want this. And I think that's pretty cool. Pretty cool like Elgin, because Elgin is a cool climate region. And what makes Elgin, and what makes Hemelanade and Elim and all of these wine places make these wines, these are all cool climate grapes. We spoke about it last time with the Cape. And it's got elevation, so it's automatically cool. It's about 1,000 feet, 400 meters above sea level. It's got southern winds that come through. It's got close proximity to the ocean. I think it's even less than 7 Ks. Early morning mists, you'll know if you've ever been there, how cold it is. And this gives, it can get quite hot in the day, and it gets diurnal day-night temperature variation. So it gets hot in the day and it gets cold at night, and grapes love this. What this does is it gives grapes a long hang time. It means that they stay on the vine for a long time. And that means that the fruit and the pips and the seeds ripen. There's 2 types of ripeness in grapes. The sugar ripeness and there's phenolic ripeness. And the sugar ripeness is mainly a function of heat and sunlight. So if it's very hot, the acids will come down and the sugars will go up. You can remember eating up in the tree when you were young, like a plum that was too early, and it was quite acidic and it didn't have much sugar. Same with this, the sugar ripens, and what you try and do is pick it when the sugar and the acid meet, because you want balance in the wine. But then you get this thing called phenolic ripeness, which is actually the ripening of the flavors, and that happens with the length of time on the vine. So what these vines do, and this is old world, this is the difference between old world and new world, is that these grapes hang on the vine for a long time so that the fruit can actually ripen. You can get the proper flavors. Rather than astringent green flavors, you get proper flavors. Because if sugar ripeness happens, if it's too hot, those sugars go up too far. Sugar converts to alcohol. They have to pick it, but they're picking it before actually the flavors are ripe. So you get green characters. You'll find in the old days, Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet Sauvignon had lots of bell pepper and greenness, and that's sort of gone away, and that's because people are managing it better. Other thing about this Elgin, and especially this is called the Ferricrete. I've done some investigation. Ferricrete's a type of soil, and I know that at Paul Cluver,
Harry,
yeah.
quick question, sorry, before we move on to the next point.
Sure.
In terms of the grapes and the ripening on the vine and the flavors, etc., I could be like way off here, but could you not mix some of the grapes? Or is that like not a done thing? You know, so maybe you took some newer grapes and you took some older grapes and then you chuck it in the same barrel and mix it up.
It's
like,
very much.
Is that a thing?
It's such a thing.
Could you do
such a thing? They take grapes from different blocks of blended wines and single variety vines. But actually, a lot of the single varieties are actually blends of the same grape from different blocks, different times. What you're trying to do is create complexity. And you can also do that by using different yeasts, or using part that's in barrel, parts that are in stainless steel. And this is what gives the complexity. But I know that in this last harvest, and especially the year before, where there was different ripening, people would pick grapes. First of all, they'll pick them at different times to try and get ripeness. And then sometimes they would also blend the early grapes, because they give it an astringency and a sort of acidity, to the later. Yeah, so they pick early so that there's still acid in there, and then they'll pick for flavor, and then they'll try and mix it. But you've got, most of the good wine people don't have to do that, because they put their grapes that are suited to where they're supposed to be, and they just grow as they should. And the job of a winemaker is to make sure that the grape, once it's picked, makes its way to the bottle and they don't fuck it up. That's all a good winemaker wants to do. Only when you've got poor grapes and stuff do you have to tinker, and you have to put things in and do this and do that. And people trying and to be experimental and make different things, but If you've got good grapes, you can only make a good wine with good grapes. You can't make a good wine with bad grapes. And so, okay, so what are we saying? So, yeah, so the soils, I told you the Bukkenfeld shell gives you like this green fig, savory, salty, which is very much part of Paul Cluver. The ferricrete means it's just got ferrous. It's an iron soil. And you get this in Elam. I saw a little blog or a video from Black Oyster Catcher, and they call it coffee clip because it just breaks like coffee. And it gives it the wine its acidity, some floralness, and some minerality. So I know that Paul Cluver grow their Riesling on the Ferricrete soil for that acidity. I'm just not sure if the Sauvignon Blanc comes from the Ferricrete, but it's called Ferricrete, so maybe it's named after the fact that they got Ferricrete soil. I don't know. Yeah, so that's the algan, and that's the soils.
So, Harry, sorry, did you say that Ferricrete is specifically for Woolies, and then we've just got like an ordinary Sauvignon Blanc?
Yeah, so I ask Bex this all the time, and I ask this all the time, and I want to know if that's the same as the Ferricrete one. But my answer is they're similar, but they actually are commissioned, and it's not made in exactly the same way. It may come from the same block or whatever, because there are so many collaborations in the Woolies. But the Ferricrete is specific to Woolies, and I think that you'll find it's Woolies Reserve Collection. So this is the top wine.
Sorry, I disappeared for a while, but hopefully in a couple of minutes we'll have two guests joining us from Paul Cluver. So hopefully we'll have Andries Berger, the winemaker, and Liesl Rust, who's actually the daughter of Paul Cluver. She's the marketing manager, and she's a good friend of mine. She's just such an amazing lady. So hopefully they're going to be joining us. Sorry, that's why I disappeared. Yay! The other big thing that Paul Cluver into is mountain biking. So if you guys love exploring the outdoors, or just, hey, yay, here's Liesl joining. Hello, Liesl. Oh.
Hi.
Everybody, this is Liesl.
Awesome. How cool is this? Harry, is it cold on your side?
My side.
I thought it's only cold in Elgin.
Now the theme, because of the full moon, the theme for today is wolf or moon. So you might see some moons or wolves around.
Ah, yeah, I was sitting last night at about 11:30 testing out that sort of like star streams. You know, like the thing where you on your phone you can get these like stars, draw little pictures on your Ooh, look who's joined. Come. See.
Hello.
Yeah.
You're the actual winemaker.
That's
Andries,
Andries, who I call the
Hi.
BFG.
Yes.
He's my big friendly giant.
Hello.
So that's why Harry's got a lovely wolfy hat.
Ah, okay.
Full moon theme, Andries. It's a full moon theme. It's a wolf because of the full moon. So you'll see some stuff. We do a theme every second day. I've got the wines, and today we're doing the Ferricrete, the Paul Cluver Ferricrete Sauvignon Blanc. So,
Okay. Awesome.
yeah.
So what's the wolf's opinion?
I think it's beautiful. Tell me if I'm wrong, because I did do a little tasting of this. I used to do the tasting at the end, and everyone was upset because they couldn't taste anymore. So at the beginning, and you know, I try to talk about the shale and talk about the Ferricrete, but I definitely get a sort of a flintiness to this. I get the gooseberries, I get sort of fig, and I get some sort of citrus. That's my take on it. And I think it's a beautiful wine. It's got a nice little oiliness to it.
What's amazing about Elgin is that we've got such low pHs, and low pH in wine gives it longevity, you know, which is great to have, you know, and that's one thing that we privileged that in Elgin, that we've got the longer hang time, the cooler climates, and that basically helps us to preserve all those nicenesses in the wine. And your descriptions on the wine is pretty spot on. I like your description.
Thanks.
You're going to help us write some of the tasting notes.
Yeah, yeah. I can. I always get them wrong though. I'm always the one who stands up.
Well, I'm a winemaker. Winemaker. I'm not a poet. We're privileged in the sense that we allowed to continue with our work. I think that's fantastic. I think it's It's a pity that we're not allowed to sell wine. Fortunately, we can export now, but that's, you know, the fact that we can't sell wine is a little bit of a worry.
We also have the privilege that, of course, we have stacks of wine here. So if the whole gets a bit depressive, at least we can open another bottle.
So, so we carry on with the work. We've just racked the last white wines today. Well, I've got 2 tanks to do tomorrow. But all the wines in barrel, the Pinot Noirs is busy with malolactics. We've stopped the fermentation on the Rieslings to retain the sugar. And the only wine that I've still got that's fermenting is a bit of Noble at Harvest. So that's the only wine that's still fermenting. But otherwise, it's actually looking very good. The wines, from a wine point of view, I'm quite happy.
Cool.
Pinot Noir.
And are you surviving post the fires? Because you had a fire, was it 2 years ago?
Last year. So the effect of the fire has got no effect on the wines of this vintage. So the fire didn't have an influence on our wines for this vintage, and the vineyards that were scorched all recovered. So that's fine. So that's in the past, yeah. But unfortunately, of the 2019 vintage, there's no Seven Flags or Estate Pinot Noir. As a business, we're all about Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Burgundy is a place very dear to my heart, and I try to go there as often as I can. Obviously not this year, but our focus of our business is Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. We happen to make the biggest volume wine that we actually produce is Sauvignon, and that's an indicator of what the market wants. People want to drink something that's fresh. Due to our climate, we also produce Riesling, and from the Riesling we also make Noble at Harvest. So that's a varietal spectrum. On the Chardonnay on the Chardonnay side, we produce 2 different Chardonnays at this stage, which is the Estate and the Seven Flags. And then on the Pinot Noir, other than the Ferricrete, we produce the Village, the Estate, and the Seven Flags Pinot Noir as well. And then for the Cape Winemakers Guild, every year I make either Chardonnay or Pinot Noir for the Guild auction as well. So that's quite focused, which being focused makes my life as a winemaker a little bit more easier. I don't have to dabble with Shiraz and Merlot and other stuff. You know, like a friend of mine says, in Bordeaux, they make an alcoholic beverage. We call Pinot Noir wine. So my focus, Pinot Noir is the only red wine I make. But as I said, Sauvignon is our biggest volume wine. And then Riesling is such a niche product, so it's a little bit, and we have the climate for it, so it's something special.
Andries, I've mentioned that I think the first grapes were planted in the climate was Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling, Gewürz, Chardonnay. The only red that you have is Pinot Noir. It's all cool climate grapes. Do you want to go through them and just talk about?
Yeah. So the first grapes that was planted was Chardonnay, Gewürztraminer, Riesling. Sauvignon and Pinot Noir followed a year or so later, and it all started off. There was, in the mid 80s, there was worldwide a drive towards the search of cool climate viticultural sites. If you think of Marlborough in New Zealand, only started making wine in the late 80s. So the sort of mid 80s, they started migrating from the North Island to the South Island, New Zealand. And the question in South Africa was, where's the cool climate viticultural areas? And there was a guy by the name of Ernst Leroux who did research on that. And he actually did his master's thesis on viticulture, and he came across Elgin. And at that stage, Elgin was apples only. Although we have record of wine being produced on the property in the 17 and the 1800s. But that was mostly home consumption stuff. So firstly, we did it in a joint venture with Niederberg back then when Günther Brösel was still their head winemaker. And him being German made sure that we plant Riesling and Gewürztraminer. So that was, there was a non-negotiable side to that. We did dabble we used to plant Cabernet. We used to have Merlot, we had Cab Franc, we had Shiraz. I had the privilege of working at Chateau Margaux in France with Paul Cluver, and we got Paul Cluver to come out to South Africa, and because in the early or late 90s, early 2000s, everybody's blend, red blend was their flagship wine, and we thought we're going to produce a flagship red blend, and that was the whole concept of Seven Flags started from that. And then it was actually Paul Cluver coming from Bordeaux to say to us, that your Pinot Noir is far better than any of the other varieties. Okay? And literally the very next year, we stopped making Cab and focused only on Pinot Noir. So that's a little bit of history on the varietal side. But as a winemaker, it makes life much more interesting just focusing on one thing. Makes it much more complex as well, because we used to have a very, very long season. So we currently are harvesting the same amount of grapes that we used to harvest, but our picking windows is much shorter.
Tell them about your nuns.
Well, it's a long story, but I'll try to make it short. There's a convent in a little town called Oosterhout in Holland, and this convent is of the Norbertinesse Catholic nuns that's been going for 750. The order has been going for 750 years. The nuns are in the same building since 1647, and they used to be beneficiaries of the Dutch royal family. And unfortunately, the royal family got told by the Dutch government that they can't donate to one religious organization if they don't donate to all. So the nuns had to find a way of financing themselves. So they decided to embrace tourism. So part of the convent is now a guest house where anybody can go and stay. They planted 8 hectares of vineyards, and the old cow stables were converted into a restaurant, a conference facility, and a winery. And one of the guys, and our importer was asked, for recommendations on winemakers, and one of the guys that actually in the local wine distributors in the area visited us here in South Africa and realized that we've got some of the same clone and same varietal spectrums. So the guys asked me whether I would be interested in making the wine for them, and if you ever meet those nuns, you will never be able to say no to them. So I couldn't say no to them. So I fly over about 3 times a year to Holland to help the convent or the nuns to make a bit of wine. And they sell everything in Holland. So they've got a fantastic restaurant actually. And if you ever get to Oosterhout, the place is called St. Catharinadal, and it's an amazing project to be involved with, where you give back to people. And every year I take one of my cellar workers with me, and so it's guys that's never been on the airplane. So we take them and we fly overseas with them. They sort of help me for the harvest, and I take the guys to Amsterdam. I show them the Valle. I show them a bit of historical places. And it's amazing to see the guys coming back. The one guy that I took after the year after after the harvest, after their June holidays, I said to the guy, "So what did you do?" He says, "No, I went to Botswana." And I said, "That's amazing," but it shows you that the fact that he's got a passport, he realized that he can travel, and he's got a friend that was a truck driver, so he decided to go with his friend to Botswana, and see a different part of Africa, which he would never have been able to do because he never would have thought of actually getting a passport to travel. And I think, and if like my senior guy in the winery now, if I see the confidence that he's got now versus before, is actually amazing. So yeah, and the guys are actually sort of queuing up who's going to go with me to Holland this year, which is quite nice.
I love it. Lots of volunteers.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. You know, if you just look at the rap sheet that Paul Cluver's got and all the initiatives that they've done for social upliftment, and when I'm saying, well, just upliftment in terms of the environment, in terms of the people and all of that kind of stuff, it's an amazing. And yeah, Liesl spoke about forest. I did mention it. I didn't have that detail that you had. There was also something about the privatization of the forests. I'm not sure if that is still the same thing with the Durist, if it's something separate. I think it is, where you've got the fruit growing school.
Yeah. Harry, just before that, Andries, what is the name of the convent again?
St. Catharinadal.
St. Catharina.
So St. Catharinadal. Yeah, it's in a little town called Oosterhout, about 45 minutes from the Belgian border. So it's quite close to Belgium in the south. It's got the most amazing, beautiful buildings. And what is amazing, the priory nun, Sister Maria Magdalena, she's actually got a master's degree in economics. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah. And she only became a nun, I think she was 27 or 28 years old when she became a nun. So, yeah.
Did something bad happen?
No, actually, she was engaged, and then she had to choose, and she decided to help the convent.
Wow.
And my wife I always joke that I've got 15 nuns praying for me 4 times a day. And last year, or the year before last, I took my wife and children with me to Europe, and as the sisters heard that I'm there, you know, I was having supper in the restaurant, and as the sisters heard I'm there, you know, they come in, you know, 2 or 3 at a time to come and say hello. And after the 4th or the 5th nun came to say hello to my wife said to me, "You really have 15 nuns praying 4 times a day for you." But they're really sweet. Yeah, and it's amazing.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, like I said, it's amazing to give back to people. And yeah, so we've the idea is that, you know, the sustainability of the convent is basically they need to generate income, you know, and because how many young people is going to become a nun today, you know, and and people don't go to church anymore, so they don't have an income, so they have to find ways to generate income for themselves.
Very cool. So bringing it a bit closer to home, can you see what I'm wearing, Andries?
I do. Yeah.
So tell us a bit about Paul Cluver and your land. I've told these guys that, you know, if they fancy getting on a mountain bike, are the trails all open now? And to Harry's question about deforestation, yeah, tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, so the trails are closed at the moment due to the lockdown. So, but hopefully, as soon as it's open, we'll open up the trails again. We've just built. I've just since past actually a little section was used in Watershed. Built a new piece of trail, a long climbing section, which is actually my type of climbing. I'm quite big, so I don't like short, sharp incline. So it's a very nice, gentle switchback climb. And then my kind of downhill, a very fast flowing downhill section. And the idea was actually to build a bridge 70 meters. Would have been between 70 and 100 meters long, literally 400 or less than 400 centimeters above the water, over one of the big dams on the farm. Unfortunately, it rained so much in January that we had such an influx of water that the dam didn't lower enough so that we can build the bridge. So we'll have to postpone that part till next year. But there's a new section which is now going to be used on the next Hoek tour and also on the next Wise tours that we've built, which is not open to the public yet, but we'll hopefully open that soon. And yeah, otherwise, you know, our trails are quite famous for all the bridges that we've got on the farm. and it's quite a feature on the tracks. Yeah.
I think the one thing that's also nice.
So tell us a bit more. How much do you export now? And Harry was telling us that, are you still predominantly a fruit farm, or are you or is wine taken over your fruit sales?
No, still fruit. Still.
It's a lot more profitable doing fruit, but you won't sit late night or do what we're currently doing, connect and meet up with people over an apple.
Yeah. You guys are not going to phone in to taste different apple varieties.
I think the next theme is going to be apples. It's going to be apples. You always come
Are you guys still doing your cider with Bruce Jack?
Yes, we do. Yeah. Cluver and Jack's still going. And on the wine, our exports is about 40%. So we more focus on the local market. And yeah.
I'll tell you.
And is Block 2A still going?
Yes.
Yes.
Tell them the Block 2A story.
Yes, it's amazing. The wine is amazing this year from that block.
Oh!
Great stuff.
Yay!
Yeah, no, it's still going strong. It's actually some amazing stuff coming out, and we've planted quite a bit of Chardonnay, and we've got a new vineyard very close to the old Wagon Trail vineyard, close to the old Chardonnay where the Seven Flags come from, and it's looking really promising. But what I'm really excited about is we've got a young block of Pinot Noir that gave the first crop this year, which is a young vineyard next to a Seven Flags vineyard site, or vineyard that goes to Seven Flags for Pinot. So we've got some nice stuff coming in. We really like to see what's going to happen in a few years' time.
Guys, one of the questions is, what's the meaning of the Seven Flags?
So we can trace the Cluver family back to the 1100s. And we've got a chronicle with a Cluver family and whatever. And the Cluver family originally comes from Germany. And one of the Cluvers, I don't know if you have a bottle of it with a Paul Cluver family crest on it. I think I'm not sure on the Ferricrete if it's the family crest is on there, but if you look at the family crest, it's got a little. There we go.
There you go.
Okay, so in the family crest, you'll see there's a bear's claw, and one of the Cluvers saved the then king of Germany by cutting off a bear's claw, so he was knighted. And when he was knighted, became von Cluver, and then got the family crest. And on the top of the family crest, there's Seven Flags. And then, so for our flagship wine, we use the sort of simplification of the top of the crest. And it's the 7 virtues man should have, which if you look at that time and era, it's like godliness, cleanliness, fear of God, wisdom. So that's basically what that's about. So it's not the 5 kids and the 2 parents or anything like that, but it is the, it comes from the family crest.
Yeah, so what I was thinking about was the 7 virtues. I read something about the 7 virtues.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And talk about exports. The first time I really got to know Paul Cluver, I was in London and I was working in Farringdon, and there was a wine, Vivid Bacchus. And
yes.
They have the huge barrel outside, and I went to go speak to Gerrie Knutzer because a friend of mine and myself was starting a restaurant, a South African sort of based restaurant in London. And I went to go get him his advice because it was about meat and wine and all that. And he said, "No, Harry, your model's not going to work." And I was blown away because they had that site and they had one at London Bridge.
That's correct.
He told me how much wine he was pushing through those doors in a day, and I just couldn't believe it. It was amazing.
Yeah, he's still a good customer.
Yeah, he's
still a good customer.
And down Farringdon Street, which is business central in London, there's a huge Paul Cluver barrel that sits outside, and come out of the station, you walk down the road, and there it is. Boom, like next to that coffee place with the green. Yeah. Anyway. Starbucks. Yeah.
Very cool. And Liesl, you've redone your tasting room recently, haven't you?
Very cool, yes. Now we just need people in there. We've got a lovely big deck and a huge, so we've made it a lot more airy. So it's not quite as dark and somber, and it's a much more,
More
fun
open.
and social venue. And we put my dad to work with making more tabletops and woodwork, because you always have to watch cash flow, as they say. With these things, the only thing the bank manager is interested in is cash flow. So we made my dad, he always says, he's done at 6 woodwork helped his neurosurgery, and his neurosurgery what he does now. So we get him to make all the table tops and things that we need. So as his friend, his one friend called him a obelisk architecture, because all his stuff is quite big and bulky.
And so Andries and Liesl, so what are your go-to lockdown wines?
Ooh, it depends on, for me, it depends on what we eat at home. Fortunately, my children are back home from varsity because they can't have class, and so normally by this time we get home, there's something made. But so I had a great bottle of Alsace Riesling last weekend, and from a friend of mine, and so it depends what we're having. I don't have one go-to one. I see what's in my cellar. And the fortunate thing of winemakers, the great thing about winemakers is that winemakers don't buy wine. We swap wine. So I've got wine from so many, of my friends and colleagues, and whether they're guild members or not. So I tend not to drink my own wine at home. I drink enough of my own wine in work and when I go on marketing trips and things like that. So I try to, the other problem with that is you get winemakers that tend to drink only their own stuff, and that's when you get what we call a cellar palate. You don't, you're oblivious to faults, and you're oblivious to other stuff. So I'd rather drink some other, some of my colleagues' wines and see what's interesting. We had a bottle of 2007 Neil Ellis Shiraz last night, just for instance. Which was pretty damn good, even given that's 13 years old.
Andries, do you mind just telling us a bit more about the Cape Winemakers Guild? I mean, that's our annual date night, actually, is the public tasting at the CITC in August.
So the Cape Winemakers Guild started in 1982 with a group of like-minded guys getting together to sit and said, how can we improve winemaking in South Africa? And at that stage, it was very difficult for winemakers to travel. That was unheard of. The use of small oak barrels was unheard of in South Africa at that time. And basically the guys got together and said, if we want to improve winemaking, you've got to taste the best wines. And still today, that's the main part of the guild, is to see how can we improve winemaking, how can we improve our own knowledge, and how can we share that with the industry. And for that we have technical tastings every year. We have about 10 of them, 10 of them in a year. Obviously not with harvest and not with the guild auction, but the idea is that we go and whatever the theme is, it needs to be the best of the best. I was privileged enough to organize the Romani Conti tasting for the guild, which was presented by Monsieur de Villaine, and we had all the wines from Romani Conti, Romani Conti is the most expensive wine in the world. It's a little place in Burgundy, and to give you an idea, a bottle of Romani Conti current vintage is going to set you back more than 100,000 rands for the bottle. So, collectively, so that was and we've got 45 members, so we need 3 bottles of every wine which we taste, and we spend quite a bit. So we spend quite a bit on technical tastings. and that is important for us. So we can taste, and see what other people do. Earlier this year, we had a tasting from winemakers from Argentina. Zuccardi was one of the producers. We had 3 Argentinian winemakers coming to South Africa to come and present their wines to us. So that's great for knowledge sharing. Each winemaker is allowed to make 2 wines for our annual auction, and that's not exceeding 100 cases by 6. So normally, on average, the size of the lots on the auction is 30 to 40 cases on average. And then we also have a development trust. So we raise about 4 million rand a year. We spend about 4 million rand a year, and we've got about 6 million rand in trust. And the whole idea regarding that is that's our part for sort of for the sustainability and transformation of the industry. We are involved in the training of about 700 cellar workers every year. There's an organization called Wine Training South Africa, and that's the only organization where cellar workers can go and get some training. So we fund them, and then we have a project program where we take, firstly, then we have a bursary scheme for final year students. So we sponsor three final year students with scholarships. We also have a scholarship for a postgraduate study at the university in winemaking. And then we take those students the idea is that we take those students that got the scholarship from us or the bursaries to come into a project program. Currently, there's 9 projects in the system. So it's 3 winemaking per year. And then there's also a viticultural project program. And that's students that's already qualified as winemakers, but then for 3 years, they come and work with guild members. So they will work with 3 different guild members. And the idea is that they learn and are mentored by the guild members. And basically we pay for them to do stuff like financial management courses at the University of the Stellenbosch University Business School. They get public speaking courses and things like that. And they also attend our tastings. And basically what we reckon is that they get exposure, what an average winemaker will get in a 7 to 10 year period, they get in 3 years. And we also take them to Burgundy and France for a harvest. Some go to America. So we try to expose them in a 3 year period to as much as possible. And what is great is that we have all our proteges actually got jobs before they finished with the program. So we have not had one protege that didn't manage to secure a job. Last year, all 3 final year proteges got jobs with guild members, which is actually quite great. I would love to see one of those guys one day become a guild member, and that'll be full circle. Yeah.
Andries, we've got a similar thing. At the moment, I'm heading up the Cape Wine Academy, and we're looking at ways to Cape Wine Academy to drive the social upliftment, the education in the wine industry, the hospitality, the tourism, bringing it all up. Obviously, things are on ice a little bit.
Yeah.
And there's such, maybe 10 years ago, the thirst from people to learn about wine because it was an apartheid kind of white man's drink has changed, and there's such a thirst now. There's so many people. I can see how many people are asking to join. I've got this thing called Harry's Big Wine Adventure just to learn more, and so I think it's amazing. Anything that can happen to bring wine to the people, to have the education, and your level at the Cape Wine Makers Guild. I mean, it's a top level. So I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I think anything that we can do to share the knowledge, and the only problem is people think wine is too pretentious sometimes, and And the people that's the most guilty of that is the winemakers. You know, we when we present our wines and taste, we take, you know, you've got to learn the audience, and we've got to, you know, I was at a tasting at a wine show in Johannesburg, and Kaya FM or something was involved, and one winemaker came to me and said, "Oh, if he's going to be asked if, you know, if Chardonnay is a blend, you know, he's going to, you know," he got irritated by the questions. And I said to him, "You shouldn't get irritated by the questions, you know, because the questions I got was, bar the question, is Chardonnay a blend, you know, or a single varietal, is what food can I have this with? You know, there is a genuine interest, and you've got to harness that interest, you know, and share the knowledge, and make it simple for people to be able to enjoy wine more."
So the reason for this platform, you know, there's a lot of tastings on, and like you, I've been very privileged. I've tasted, and Bex, I mean, Bex and I were in the same tasting group, tasted wines, international wines. I've had to taste the best of the best in South Africa. But that's not where your market is. And yes, this isn't probably the demographic that's representing the demographics of South Africa. But the idea of this group is to take wines that you can get at Pick and Pay and Woolies and stuff, which average at 80 to 100 Rand a bottle. And we sit here, and what we're trying to do here is create relationships with wines, because most people will have one or two go-to wines that they go to the whole time because they've heard that they're nice, and they take them to the same braais. And by showing different varieties with different people, getting the winemakers on where we can, and sharing stories. So I've got tick lists to this environment, and that's, was there information shared? Was there storytelling? And was there socializing? And I tick those and I go, that's fine. And we know that there's 30 or 40 people here, they would have gone away. And then now they know that Paul Cluver is another Sauvignon Blanc that I can go to because it's flipping delicious. And now I've got more than just one that I go to every braai. And now I know a little bit of information, so I can actually tell people stories. And it's through that we grow. And it's about looking at the accessible wines, not the 400 Rand up wines, not looking at the international wines. There's a place for them, and I really love those wines. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely adore those wines. But that's not where it's going to make the change for the wine industry.
Absolutely.
A very serious question from me. When you took all your guys to the Amsterdam, did you take them to the Reaper Barn? You said you took them everywhere.
I didn't, but I did. So one funny story was we were walking, and there's a guy who used to work for us on the farm, and he was known to be, you know, quite a big pot smoker. And we were walking, and my guy that was working with me, his name was Norton, and Norton, you know, as we were walking in the streets of Amsterdam, he was sort of smelling, and he was smelling the guy smoking. Yeah. And he sort of pulled me aside. He said, "But I smell dagga." Yeah. And I said, "Well, it's legal here, you know." But I actually joked with him, I'm going to take him to a coffee shop. He said, no problem. He will go to a coffee shop. But he didn't know what a coffee shop was. And when he realized what a coffee shop was, he said, no, there's no ways he goes in. He's not even a smoker. So there's no ways I'm going in there. But yeah, so no, I didn't go to that bar.
If you want to hear about Romani Conti, isn't that where there was a whole fraud with a guy called Rudy Kanayan, whatever. Can't remember his name.
No, there was a fraud with a guy. There was a guy by the name of Rene Den, a guy from Denmark that fraudulently, what he did is he refilled bottles and hosted tastings all over the world, sold tickets for a lot of money, and he even came to buy wine at the Cape Winemakers Guild auction. And subsequently, all the Cape Winemakers Guild wine now have a security seal in the label, which can't be copied. And it's a hologram. It's not a hologram. It's a security film, same as what they use in banknotes. And the reason for that is because we don't want our labels to be copied.
Wow. I know we've got less than a minute, so I really just want to take this opportunity to just say Like, this is who Liesl and Paul Cluver are all about. They're such down-to-earth people in the fact that I could literally just drop them a message and they would kind of come on board. So that's who they are. So if you haven't been to Paul Cluver, you really need to go and see them, because they're freaking awesome people. And to top it all, they also make amazing wines as well. So yeah, just thank you so much, Andries and Liesl, you guys.